Hello and welcome. I am that James guy, and today we're going to be looking at Battle for the Bosporus. This is going to be in a review format, so it's not really going to be much gameplay, though there is going to be gameplay. It's just going to be in the background and yeah, but sometimes we'll flip to and from, but whatever, we'll move on from that. We're going to be looking at three things: the good, the bad, and the stuff that I don't really like that much and that I think maybe not necessarily was thought out, but isn't bad, isn't good, it's sort of wishy-washy. One thing I would like to say before we crack on with the sort of review is I did receive the copy of Battle for the Bosporus for free from Paradox Interactive for purposes of streaming and other stuff. So, let's jump in, shall we? So, here we are in Battle for the Bosporus. We're in the game now, and there's sort of four main points to what I think is really, really good about this DLC. And I'm in Bulgaria at the moment because I think that's probably the best place to start with this first point, is the attention to detail and these interesting internal mechanics in Bulgaria, Greece, and Turkey. They work slightly differently in all three, but they're broadly the same, that you actually have an internal political and demographic situation that you have to take care of that is important. You have to spend your political power, you have to do decisions and events in the right way to be able to steer your nation in the way you want to. And that is a solid step in the right direction that really brings to life playing these different countries. Now, that isn't to say it's all good. I think Turkey has a few problems with how long it takes to deal with some of the issues. For example, basically, the focuses are a bit too long in a lot of instances, and it takes quite a while to get down through the tree to be able to deal with the internal stuff and then deal with the external stuff and then crack on and get involved in World War II. Which very, very neatly brings me on to a second great point, is that all of these nations have very, very strong focus trees that are very interesting and great fun to play. I will counterbalance that later with some other things, but right now, and to start, they're all a joy to play in single player. You can do so much interesting stuff, and you really do feel like you're going from the underdog to a world power, and that's great in single player. And really, so we're sort of a few minutes in, maybe even less, maybe even as many as 2. And honestly, the good stuff is sort of running out because they are exceptionally fun nations to play with great internal mechanics, and you can't really say anything else about it other than that. They are a joy to play. They have, let's look at Greece for example, so many options, you can do so many different things. You aren't just limited to 3 boring paths of communist, democratic, and fascist, and non-aligned, I guess, is the 4th path. And you don't just go Axis, Comintern, Allies, other. You really do have multiple routes through each of the options we can do. Non-aligned central powers in an ahistorical game, we can do allies and jump in from the start. We can do allies but jump in after it kicks off. We can do fascist. We can do fascist with Turkey and fascist against Turkey, both in the Axis. We can do communist in the Comintern and against the Comintern as a separate communist entity. We can do Byzantium down here, or non-aligned Megali idea. That's already 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5, 5, 6, 6.5 routes through the political focus tree that are all interesting. And it's much the same story with Bulgaria. You have, let's just get down here, we've got Stalinist, we've got non-Stalinist independent Balkan League of Socialism, we've got Balkan Confederation, which is the non-socialist democratic route into the same federation. We've got join the Allies and also expand Bulgaria or not expand Bulgaria. We've got Turbo Bulgaria and we have Axis Bulgaria. We also then have Bulgaria, Churchy Bulgaria or Bulgarian Empire Bulgaria. So that's lots of options. They're all interesting, they're all fun, they're all big. And I think my main critique of the DLC is that they are very much balanced around single player, perhaps too much. I understand that the vast majority of Paradox game players play in single player. However, a large part of the community does play in multiplayer, and a large part of that single player community likes to play historical World War II rather than a turbo sandbox World War II. And I think the issue I have is that the historical path is too strong for these minor nations. Greece is a good example, whereby they become very, very strong. They go from having no economy to being about as strong as Italy. They go from, in Bulgaria's case, having no industry to, if you join the Axis and get given some land by Germany, you get more dockyards than anyone else in the game for free and end up matching Britain and America in naval production. And that's the historical route. History tells us that didn't quite happen. There weren't Bulgarian battleships in the Bosporus in World War II, to my knowledge. Happy to be corrected in comments. As far as I know, they only had a small motor torpedo boat-based navy sort of thing going on. Turkey as well, the historical route sees them joining the war in about 1942 to 3, depending on the situation and luck of the draw. If you're a player, if it's an AI, they join in 44 to early 45. Historically, they didn't join until basically both sides were knocking on Berlin's door. And that is the fundamental basis of the majority of my critique of these focus trees, and it all hinges on balance of power. There seems to be an element of power creep that has sort of slipped in somewhere here. You have a situation whereby minor nations with these new focus trees, and it was starting to happen in other DLCs, but this is the first one where it has sort of crossed the line, shall we say, whereby minor nations don't really feel like minor nations, and that makes major nations feel less like world powers. Obviously, it's a game, and there has to be strong, interesting gameplay, whether you're playing as the US of A or whether you're playing as Greece. However, Greece and Bulgaria and Turkey shouldn't be able to industrially compete with the big boys. And already, industry is balanced in the game around gameplay. It's not balanced historically. Otherwise, Britain and France would have way more factories than they do at the start of the game. And Germany would also have a few more, but also, for some reason, it's not letting me click on them. With historical industry balances, the situation in Europe would be very different, and 40% of the world's industry would be in America. That is clearly not the case. And you can't have that level of historical industry balance and still have an interesting game playing as Portugal, because you just never will be able to compete. Though making small nations ridiculously strong is not the solution. giving them other ways to increase their power perhaps would be a more interesting route. And they started to do this with the changes to licensing and lend-lease, and I think they should look more in that direction and less in the how many factories can we give them in their focus tree. However, they did do this. They have thought about this. Most of your industrial gain comes from investment from the great powers. The foreign subsidized factories here. In Turkey, you get decisions to go and ask for investment from the great powers. I believe, though I could be wrong, I haven't played much of Bulgaria yet. I believe they too have ways to get investment from other nations. Yeah, attract foreign capital focuses and the industrial agreements. There you go. And that is an interesting way of boosting your powers nations. You take some of the wealth and industrial power out of your allies and you're moving it to your miners in your faction. The UK is giving up some of its factories to invest in the Greek economy. Perfect. Love it. However, and this is where we get to perhaps a very typical paradox problem. There were quite a lot of bugs. Now, lots of those have been fixed. Now the beta patch is in beta, and you can opt into that and get a much better experience than you were getting previously. But lots of those investment decisions didn't seem to work as anticipated. You have great relations with the UK, plus 100. I'm in the Allies. We're fighting the war together against Germany. I've spent 150 PP to ask them to build some anti-air and some infrastructure, and the AI says no. Not great. It should be much clearer in the game as to how you successfully take that from the UK or France or America or whoever it is and get it in your nation. In multiplayer, it's very obvious. Yo, Britain player, can I get some lend-lease? Can I get some, I don't know, factories, please? Here you go. I'm spending my PP. Press yes to the event. Woo, yay, go me. Free factories rock in, everyone's a winner. Single player, right, I've improved relations, I'm in the faction, neither of us are at war, so maybe that won't affect it. Press button, and nothing. Press button again, and nothing. We'll try France. Press button, ooh, we got given a building slot in Crete. Yay. And this really came to a head when I did a sort of friendly 1v1 against Turkey as Greece. He fired up his investment decisions. Oh, excuse me. He got some strong RNG and got given, I think it was 8 military factories altogether. I got 1 building slot for 400 PP. It just wasn't worth it. And that's the area where it's kind of letting itself down. There's a lot of great interactions between the nations, but they don't necessarily have logical, well thought out conclusions. And that kind of swings me round again. There's so much good in this DLC that makes it well worth the money, frankly. Which is what you have to do at the end of the day. You have to say, is the price, I believe, $7.99 in British pounds sterling, or that would be about $9.99 in euros, or presumably similar numbers in dollar. What is the worth? How much gameplay do you get out of this? And frankly, if you play single player only and you absolutely love and enjoy your single player experience and you like playing nations such as Austria-Hungary or Manchuria into the Qing Empire, you're going to get a lot of enjoyment out of this DLC. If you like playing historical France and historical Germany and the Soviet Union and historical Romania, you're not going to get as much enjoyment out of this DLC. And in multiplayer, that's just looking at single player. In multiplayer, I was really looking forward to there being an alternative Axis miner, because currently the Axis do get a bit of the short end of the stick in multiplayer balance, in that really you've got Germany, Italy, Romania, Hungary, Finland, and then Japan and Manchuria. That's 7 player slots that can go Axis realistically. Having a useful Bulgaria with its own focus tree that can actually do something is quite a nice advantage for them. And then in the Allies, having a miner that isn't a Commonwealth nation would also have been very beneficial to multiplayer balance, because the Commonwealth nations have inherent bonuses. So stacking players in the Commonwealth is far superior to having players in other allied miners. And having a Greece there is a nice alternative to having a South Africa or a Australia or a probably not a Canada or a Raj. You probably still want both of those, but having the option for more allied miners was a great idea and a great thing. In multiplayer, I'm going to discount Turkey because either it's a meme game and anyone can do anything and they will be fine, or it's a historical game and no one's going to want to play them. So that's the 3 nations. We've looked at them in a way and we've discussed what's good and what's bad. The other content that was added was all added in the free patch, as far as I'm aware. There was the changes to the Yugoslavia focus tree and the Romania focus tree. Neither of those have been any big changes. They're mostly quality of life. And then there's the patch. Overall, and in conclusion, which is where we're going now, I will see you in a second, all full screen and magnificent, for us to just close this out with my final thoughts. I know this has been a ramble, but everyone loves a good ramble, don't they? Let's go look at the closing thoughts. Conclusion time! How many salutes does Battle for the Bosporus get? Well, the answer is twofold. And I hinted at this earlier. If you're a single player person and you love playing a historical, 7, 8 salutes out of 10. If, however, you enjoy your historical games and multiplayer, we're looking closer, unfortunately, at only 4 salutes out of 10. Though, that does mean there is one other thing I would like to say in conclusion that I think is very important. This DLC was made by a freelance developer. I believe it was only 1 developer, though there may have been a second. I could be wrong. Separate from the Paradox team. And I think that's very good. This content is not the big expansion pack content that I personally want the Paradox developers to be working on. It is the sort of superfluous by the side content that fills out the world and makes the game better in broad terms, not in deep focus terms. And having this DLC produced by a third party really does help, because it's meant that the Paradox development team, since the end of LAR, La Resistance, has been able to concentrate on the Barbarossa patch and DLC, which they have subtly announced / hinted at, and really flesh out and fix the Eastern Front, Italy, and hopefully logistics. Those are the 3 things I'm looking for in the DLC. And I think if this wasn't done by a freelance developer, either we wouldn't have it and they would just be spending the same amount of time on Barbarossa, or the Barbarossa patch and content would be earlier and less well created. And with that, I bid you adieu. You can always catch me on Twitch, where I will be streaming a lot of various different types of content. And if you enjoy YouTube videos, you can like and subscribe and ring a bell. We love it when you do that. Thank you, and have a good one. I'll see you again soon.